I'm sure some of us understand what this ecosystem means, but I think it is also important for us to identify those entities, understand what is their role that we expect from them, and then what are current challenges in this ecosystem. See, basically the ecosystem, uh, startup ecosystem, contribution pyramid, if you see, what does this really contribute? The startups. The startups definitely, I mean, as we go up the pyramid, starting from overall economic development, why do we need startups? Overall economic development, promote exports, naturally leading to growth in GDP, improved standard of living for the countrymen, distribution of wealth along with creation of wealth. It's not just distribution, but it's a creation of wealth. And ultimately, I would say the peak is producing new jobs. If that happens, this pyramid will automatically become stronger, it will become stable. So while at the bottom is the generic word or generic term, that is overall economic development of the nation, finally that is going to happen if we are able to create new jobs. I think that is what the Honorable Prime Minister and DT Ayog has been talking. Why do we need startups? We need startups because we want to develop new jobs in this country. Because we have, as we know, we have close to 700 universities, because this particular topic that is given to me is talking about the role of academic institutions in startup ecosystem. In the startup ecosystem, we have government, we have industry, and the academia, or the university, if we use the word specific. We have close to 700 universities in the country. And how many people graduate? 5 million. 5 million people every year come out of the universities. And therefore, to provide jobs to these 5 million qualified, and this, mind you, this is, as we all know, is probably 2% of the population that gets into formal education. Forget about those who are not even in that formal education system. But as an individual, it is the responsibility of the government, of the society, to create an opportunity for employment to these people. But even if we have to take this 5 million, it is not possible for the government or for any non-governmental entity to create that many jobs. And that is why we are talking about startup. Because startup, as we all know, will be entrepreneurial journey and not becoming something what we know is employee character. And I think therefore, at the institute level, at the university level, what we have to bring transformational change is to give the training or create the mindset of learn how to do things and not learn to do things. What is happening is when we are imparting this education at the institutions, we are telling them what to do and not how to do things. We tell them, I mean, just to take a crude example, we tell them how to do a trial balance. Okay? Even at that level, we tell them to do trial balance. But when they go out in the industry and they are given the responsibility of handling, the finance or accounts department of even the smallest of the commercial entity, that trial balance does not happen. And this is the reality that we have seen. Therefore, I think at the academic institutions, at the university level, we will have to start training, imparting education, learning how to do things, not what to do. That is number one. Number two, what is the role of an academic institution? I think at the academic institutions, the important contribution that we can make is to generate ideas, inventions, and research. While the industry will keep on demanding for new products, it will keep on demanding for innovative ways of doing things, but for that to happen and for that to succeed, academic institutions will have to generate ideas. Today, if you see, the ideas are coming from industry, unfortunately not getting germinated at the institutions, and therefore that disconnect we are seeing. So this new idea of having incubation centers at the institutions so that all the required research can be done, all the required academic support can be provided to these startups at the initial level itself, I think this is a welcome move. Because what is the feedback on some of these things that why startups fail? Because we all know, and then we also keep saying that, okay, don't worry, if the startup fails, we tried, it was a new idea. The feedback, the research says that what are the lessons? Why startups fail? So basically, the startups fail because they try to solve a wrong problem. They try to solve a wrong problem. So we need to identify what is the real problem. And that filtration of what is the real problem can happen at the academic institution. Because academic institution will be able to take a 360 view, a holistic approach as to what is really the issue. Instead of going unidirectional, because industry will obviously tell them, no, I just want this to happen. I want my production cost to go down. Now, whether the material of construction is important, or the process is important, or what is the real issue, that I think is an exercise, and the whole ecosystem at the academic institution should help the startups. At the institutions, what can happen is early learning can happen, because startups, as I said, they fail, and what happens is a catastrophic effect. When one startup fails, he gives a message that, oh, something like this will not work. So I think at the academic institutions, we should also create a system where learning can happen at the early stage and learning can happen at multiple stages. So learn early and learn oftenly. These two things can happen at the institution, at the academic institution. This cannot happen in industry. This cannot happen when you are actually operating in that ecosystem where your success is absolutely essential. So this is another thing I think the academic institutions can do. The second thing that the institutions can do is actually turn a perceived risk into the asset. If you see, we say that all great innovations happened because there was some need. Need is the basic driver which creates the innovations. So that exercise can also happen at the academic institutions. So I think the academic institutions, where we are talking about incubation centers, we are talking about startup ecosystem, we will have to think on these lines. We are not trying to create business centers in the academic institutions. We are trying to create the knowledge ecosystem for these startups so that that experiment, that learning, that assessment, that model can be applied across the board, not necessarily to a particular segment or particular sector. What the institutions also need to help is the way to get started and also to change the mindset from talking to actually doing. What our sister talked about, or what the other friend talked about, archery. I mean, they just did not stop at thinking or sharing. They actually converted that idea into an action. They are in doer mode. I think that is what makes the startup become more successful. The other thing, in my opinion, what the institutions can do, we have close to 3,000 tech startups in the country, and these are mostly supported by about say 200 plus incubation centers. So where are these incubation centers? These incubation centers are again in the academic institutions. So I think this is another area where academic institutions can focus. Which are those startups which are tech based? Because again, the technology related research can be done at the institutions because we have labs available, we have literature available, we have a whole lot of access to the global development that are taking place, which the industry unfortunately does not have an access to. So I think this is another area where the academic institutions can play a role. So first, to me, is exposure is what the academic institutions should provide, and that should happen when they are at the institute. I think what the government is now trying to do of introducing these Untitled incubation centers at the school level and at the university level is basically giving that exposure to the students at that level itself. And we have seen the results that the coding is done better by the young minds because they come out with the new ideas, new concepts. So I think that is another area where the academic institutions can play a role. This exposure will lead to startups. The startups obviously would require the infrastructure, culture, and then we will need to boot up. Once the startup entity is there, we will need to provide the market linkage to them. And lastly, and very important according to me, is scaling up. Because this is again a stage where many of these startups fail. They have this challenge of scaling up. And scaling up is not just, as we all know, is not just a mathematical equation. Scaling up means introduction of new risks. Scaling up means you have to probably have a different risk mitigation plan. And introducing that variable into your effort to scale up has a very, very different challenge. And I think that is where most of our startups are also finding challenges. So what is happening is we have small startups operating in silos in a particular geographical area, but we have not been able to create those linkages, we have not been able to hook them, we have not been able to create a platform where these startups can talk to each other and actually see the economies of scale. So that is again something which I think can be a role, can be something that the academic institutions can do. So I think to me, these are some of the things or areas where academic institutions can play a role. Obviously, for all of this to happen, we need a big vision, again where academicians can play a role, because academicians at that stage, when we are talking about vision, we should not be considering the limitations, the boundaries, the challenges that otherwise we immediately get onto. I mean, not to again say that something great has been done, but I mean, if you have this challenge that okay, you are today faced with certain situation, we have to have this mindset that I am going to find a solution, and that can happen only when you have a big vision. Of course, discipline and focus is required. That again is something that the institutions can help. Failures will happen. It's not that the failures will not happen. And I keep telling my young friends at the engineering college and at the management institute also that it is good that we fail at the academic institutions, because here we can afford to fail. Because here someone can help you find what is the problem, what was the mistake. Once you go out in the industry, it is not possible for you to fail because the competition is that big. So therefore, failures will happen, and then in my opinion, academic institutions will have to play a role when it comes to helping the ecosystem to actually develop. I just want to read out some of the things that our former president, Dr. APJ Kalam, once said about what the universities should be doing. No, I mean, we are talking about academic institutions' role in ecosystem. I think this is very, very apt, reference that I found. Yesterday, natural resources defined power. Today, knowledge is power. And therefore, universities will be the powerhouse because knowledge resides here. Yesterday, hierarchy was the model. Today, synergy is the model. Universities will be enabler to intersection and multidisciplinary approach to any goals that we want to achieve. Yesterday, leaders commanded and controlled. Today, leaders empower and coach. Therefore, potential leaders will be empowered through exposure to the needs of the sustainable development. Again, something that the universities can do. Yesterday, stakeholders came first. Everything that we did was for getting better return on investment, which was in absolute financial terms, and therefore shareholders' interest was paramount. Today, customers come first. Education should therefore inculcate sensitivity to customers' need. Yesterday, employees took orders. Today, teams make the decision. So, university can inject team spirit. Yesterday, seniority signified the status. Today, creativity drives the status. And therefore, universities can be the cradle for this creativity. Yesterday, production demanded availability. We all know the days, when we had to wait for 6 months, 1 year to get a particular brand, a particular model of an automobile or a motorcycle. Today, we walk to the showroom and decide what we want to buy. So, today, competitiveness is the key. Competitiveness is powered by research, and university has to have the motto of teaching, research and teaching. Yesterday, value was extra. Again, something that we all will remember, that I wanted a bike, I wanted a fridge, but with a double door, then I had to pay extra because it was seen or perceived as add-on. Today, value is everything. Today, when I go to the market, I decide that okay, I want to buy a mobile phone which will cost me about 20,000 rupees. So what do I go and ask for? I go and ask for the features that I get in 20,000 rupees. So value therefore is everything today. Yesterday, everyone was a competitor. Today, everyone is your customer. Even your competitor can be your customer because he may have orders which he is not able to execute, now where does he go? He has to find somebody who can produce this. And you could be his competitor, but then he can still come to you because he has a commitment which he wants to fulfill. Yesterday, profits were earned through expediency. Today, work with integrity and succeed with integrity. So these are some of the things which I thought are very, very good points that our former president spoke when he was speaking at one of the university as to what is the role. And we all know that he is the pioneer when it comes to building this culture, introducing this concept of startups and encouraging the young entrepreneurs in this country. With this, I will stop here. Thank you very much for your patient listening.